Dr. Catherine Halsey is one of Halo's more fascinating characters. As the mind behind the Spartan program, Mjolnir-powered assault armor, and numerous innovations across the sciences of the 26th century, truly, her brilliance cannot be understated. Despite the keen intelligence she wielded, she also demonstrated a very pronounced care and concern for humanity as a whole, with particular emphasis with her Spartans. Her immense contributions to the UNSC and humanity during the years before, during and after the Human Covenant War were informed by an intense desire to keep humanity moving forward. That being said, there is a growing rhetoric that, despite these immense innovations and the rather obvious motivations behind them, she is nothing but a mad scientist, bent on massaging her own ego and throwing caution, ethics, and morality to the wind in her relentless pursuit for scientific achievement, influence, and notoriety. Many believe she is simply a war criminal who operated completely independently to secure a greater good as she saw it, with zero inhibition or concern for anyone or anything standing in her way. But how guilty of these crimes is she truly? Is she a war criminal, a mad scientist, obsessed with personal and professional achievement? Or is she simply a brilliant mind, manipulated and gaslit into a position enabled by a faceless shadow government, and ultimately used as the fall guy and scapegoat to the immense crimes that were perpetrated in pursuit of UEG sovereignty and supremacy? Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and today we're diving into a passion project of keen interest to me. I've been really excited about writing this one. Dr. Halsey as a character has fascinated me since I first read about her in Halo: The Fall of Reach. Every book that released thereafter that had her as a character within only added to my fascination and respect for her as a character. She was morally grey and complex. Her motivations in the earlier books seemed solely aimed at creating humanity's greatest warriors to help protect human civilization from complete collapse, initially due to the looming threat of the insurrection, and quickly pivoting to an alien hegemony bent on the religiously motivated genocide of our species. But as the wider narrative continued with new book releases and the war worsened, her motivation shifted again from sacrificing the few to save the many, to saving absolutely anyone she could. Noble, if a little misguided. But a trait that irrevocably seated her as a compassionate member of humanity, rather than a lofty intellect and steward of our species' future. Halo Reach released, and with it we got our first in-game appearance of Halsey, as well as her journal, which itself was a treasure trove of lore and context that simply hadn't existed before, but gave immense context to her early years, her academic achievements, her recruitment into ONI, and the manipulations that obviously took place to make it happen, along with the early and mid stages of the development of the Spartans and Mjolnir. It also highlighted the reality that the insurrectionists, far from being a ragtag band of rebels with out-of-date weapons and jerry-rigged equipment, were an organised, multifaceted organisation spanning dozens of colonies and outposts, and able to influence the outer colonies sociopolitically and perpetrate crimes against humanity with weapons of mass destruction that were truly horrific in scale and in the suffering and destruction they could exact. This all served to paint a much more detailed picture of Halsey's character, her motivations, the influences and environmental factors that informed many of her life choices that ultimately brought her to the attention of the Office of Naval Intelligence, itself a shadow government organisation with an off-the-books military-industrial complex with almost unlimited budget and zero oversight. The narrative saw Halsey as a singular beacon of hope, working tirelessly in the company of an organisation that itself had done horrific things simply to maintain its own supremacy, so that she could deliver a class of warriors hitherto unseen by humanity to not only assure our species' future against any threat that may arise, but to one day be strong enough and influential enough to take down the very organisation that funded and administrated their creation in the first place, finally freeing humanity of the all-seeing, all-knowing, and all-controlling military-industrial complex that we were warned about in the 20th century by US President Dwight Eisenhower in his farewell address to the American people in 1961. It was then not entirely surprising that following the Human Covenant War and the establishment of the Spartan branch, the Office of Naval Intelligence, knowing full well the scrutiny and outrage that would result from the revelations on the horrific nature of the Spartan-II program, chose their chief scientist as the fall guy to distance themselves from the crimes and maintain their vice-like grip on control and influence as they had for centuries. A plan they likely intended from the moment Halsey appeared on their radar. Yet in spite of all of this information being available, the wider opinion, the court of public opinion, shall we say, on Halsey is that she is the war criminal Oni say she is. So, I endeavoured to fully investigate this claim in a deep dive and critical analysis of Halsey, her motivations, environmental factors, and everything that played a part in the decisions and actions she ultimately took to deliver humanity's finest warriors, in the hopes of fully understanding her true level of guilt and culpability in the ethical crimes and violations of the mortal dictator.
The Mortal Dictator Act defends many things, but mostly it enshrines the individuality and validity of each human life. I hesitate to call it a human rights charter, because that term has been utterly devalued and its intent completely distorted over the centuries. The Mortal Dictator are a suite of laws that remind us of the basic moral duty that we owe our own species. They bar us from creating humans for the purposes of harvesting tissue, even if that human has an otherwise independent life. They bar us from enslaving others. And they bar us from cloning entire humans. The Mortal Dictator recognizes central principle that no human should be brought into existence or co-opted primarily as a convenience for others. Each life is equal and valid.
Dr. Catherine Halsey is one of the most complex and morally ambiguous figures in the Halo universe. As the architect of the Spartan-II program and Mjolnir-powered assault armor, her contributions to humanity's survival against existential threats, such as the Covenant, are undeniable. However, her methods, including the abduction and indoctrination of children, the use of flash cloning, and the creation of the AI Cortana from a clone of herself, have raised profound ethical and moral concerns. To understand Halsey's actions, one must balance the undeniable strategic benefits of her work against the severe ethical violations inherent in her methods. It is critical to acknowledge that her actions were carried out with the full knowledge and consent of the Office of Naval Intelligence, which complicates the perception of her culpability and highlights the morally grey nature of her character. Halsey's creation of the Spartans provided humanity with super soldiers capable of turning the tide in conflicts, first against the insurrectionists and later against the Covenant. The Spartans' extraordinary combat effectiveness and resilience saved countless lives and delayed humanity's extinction. The strategic benefit of the program are undeniable. Without the Spartans, humanity would likely have fallen much earlier to the Covenant's overwhelming technological and military superiority. The psychological impact of the Spartans also served as a powerful tool for morale, offering hope to a beleaguered human population facing extinction. The Mjolnir armor allowed the Spartans to maximize their combat potential, offering unparalleled strength, speed, and resilience. This technology later benefited humanity at large, influencing military advancements and defense strategies beyond the Spartan program itself. Cortana, an AI clone based on Halsey's own brain patterns, was instrumental in guiding Spartan operations, particularly during key battles such as the Fall of Reach and the defense of Earth. Her presence extended beyond military strategy, influencing technological advancements and deepening the understanding of Forerunner technology. The Spartan-II program involved the kidnapping of 6-year-old children who were replaced with flash clones that inevitably died shortly thereafter. These children were subjected to rigorous training and physical augmentations that resulted in a high mortality rate, with many others permanently disabled. The indoctrination stripped them of their childhoods, reshaping their identities to serve as weapons of war. From an ethical standpoint, this program represents a gross violation of human rights, effectively denying these individuals their autonomy and free will. The Spartan-II program involved the controversial abduction of children who were identified as having the genetic and psychological potential to become super soldiers. While the ethical implications of this act are severe, it is important to note that these children were never lied to about their situation. From the moment of their induction, they were informed of their purpose: to serve and protect humanity at all costs, and were told that they would never see their families again. Despite their young age, many of the Spartan-II candidates accepted their charge with remarkable resilience and enthusiasm. Whether due to their innate personalities, upbringing, or a sense of destiny, they quickly internalized their roles and embraced their training. Some Spartans even viewed their selection as a form of fate or providence, believing they were chosen for a higher purpose beyond their understanding. While the honesty shown to the Spartans may seem like a redeeming factor, it was likely a calculated strategy by Oni to ensure the children harbored no resentment or mistrust towards their handlers. By providing a brutally honest portrayal of their circumstances, Oni engineered a situation in which the Spartans would see no alternative path, and thus dedicate themselves fully to their role without rebellion. While the Spartans accepted their fate willingly, it is crucial to recognize that at the age of 6, they lacked the cognitive maturity to fully grasp the long-term ramifications of their choice. Their willingness may have been influenced by their underdeveloped ability to weigh moral and ethical considerations, making it morally reprehensible that such profound decisions were imposed on them. The UNSC's decision to capitalize on their impressionable minds further underscores the ethical concerns that surround their indoctrination. A particularly dark aspect of the Spartan-II program was the flash cloning to replace the abducted children with nearly identical replicas. These clones, while biologically identical, were imperfect and short-lived, suffering from severe physiological degradation that led to their inevitable deaths within months. Despite being clones, these replacements were, in their own right, human beings with thoughts, emotions, and memories that were copied from their original counterparts. While they lacked the context of their recalled experiences, to them, those memories felt no less real. This presents a profound ethical dilemma. Their suffering and eventual demise were no less tragic than if they had been naturally born. Oni's use of flash clones provided a degree of closure to the families, ensuring that suspicions regarding the children's disappearances were minimized. Conveniently for Oni, this also allowed them to maintain the highly classified nature of the Spartan-II project, preventing potential leaks that could jeopardize the program. However, this pragmatic approach does not mitigate the emotional toll experienced by the parents, who unknowingly grieved for artificial beings they believed to be their true children. The success of the Spartan-II program ultimately produced humanity's greatest warriors, who played a critical role in ensuring humanity's survival against the Covenant threat. However, this success came at an incalculable moral cost. The suffering of the clones and the grief of the families were real, and the ethical ramifications of sacrificing these innocent lives cannot be overlooked. The use of flash clones to replace abducted children was morally reprehensible, as it resulted in the inevitable and painful deaths of these artificial copies. The genetic manipulation of the Spartan-II candidates raised additional concerns about consent and the long-term ramifications of such alterations on their humanity and psychological well-being. By cloning her own brain to create Cortana, Halsey further blurred ethical lines regarding identity and self-determination. This act raises questions about the boundaries of personal agency and the ethical implications of using one's own genetic material to create sentient, artificial intelligence. It is important to note that Halsey's actions were not conducted in isolation. They were sanctioned, funded, and actively managed by Oni. The Spartan-II program was conceived under the looming threat of human insurrection and later repurposed to combat the Covenant threat. Oni's directives often involved coercion, manipulation, and secrecy, and Halsey operated within a system that prioritized survival over ethical considerations. Oni presented Halsey with a grim reality. Humanity's survival required extreme measures. Given the pressing threats, the ethical concerns of her work were often dismissed in favor of expediency and necessity. Following the war, Oni conveniently shifted blame onto Halsey, portraying her as a rogue scientist to distance themselves from the program's ethical breaches. Halsey's vilification serves as a scapegoat narrative, allowing Oni to maintain its credibility while continuing ethically dubious projects under new guises. Halsey's moral complexity lies in the fact that she genuinely believes in the necessity of her work, often expressing regret for the sacrifices made. However, she remained steadfast in her belief that her actions were justified in the face of humanity's potential extinction. Halsey is directly guilty of illegally cloning her own brain for use in her AI program and interfering with Spartan deployment. The cloning of her brain is a breach of the mortal dictator, so that speaks for itself regardless of how useful Kalmaya, Cortana, and ultimately the weapon were to the war effort. As for interfering with Spartan deployment, this was specifically her abduction of Kelly 087. She could also be charged with this with Noble Team on Reach, but again Oni gave her the authority to do so. Kelly 087 was removed from active duty by Halsey, but it isn't as straightforward as that. Kelly wouldn't have willingly left the battlefield for anyone outside of her chain of command. As it was, she was sedated at the time, due to severe burns to 72% of her body, following taking 2 assault cannon blasts from a hunter pair as she protected Halsey with her body. She was thus in no state to be seeing active combat along with the rest of the Spartans in the situation they found themselves in, and ultimately needed urgent medical care, which Halsey was in the position to administer. However, because she technically falls outside of the chain of command, this action was viewed as a civilian interfering with Spartan deployment. Everything else, and I do mean everything else, that she did was either hypothetical until Oni approved it, gave funding, and put her in charge through manipulation and coercion, or was done by and with the full knowledge, approval, and direction of the Office of Naval Intelligence. This doesn't dismiss her culpability in the other charges, of course, but does give important context. The Spartan program was entirely hypothetical until Oni made effort to acquire her and rigged the situation to somewhat force her into action. They manipulated her and gaslit her into the position of chief scientist of the Office of Naval Intelligence, and then used their well-seasoned tactics to keep her on task. The kidnapping of children was done so solely on Oni's authorization. Halsey merely suggested that children, or more accurately, recently post-pubescent adolescents, would be more accepting of augmentation, and that certain gene markers would benefit survivability. It was Oni that then took it upon themselves to access the gene profiles of used vaccination needles to find young candidates to fit that criteria, and it was Oni who then arranged the flash cloning of replacement children who would die of seemingly natural causes thereafter, and the kidnapping of the originals. Halsey was already developing methods to increase survivability of the augmentations so that anyone could get them, thereby circumnavigating the need for children as candidates. Oni just wanted it done sooner to address what they saw as the looming threat of the insurrection and full societal collapse, leading to them losing their supremacy and control over all human colonies, completely ignoring the idea or concept that perhaps if they spoke to and negotiated with the outer colonies regarding their demands for independence, that such a societal collapse could have been avoided entirely. Their unyielding desire to keep their power premeditated that they rushed the job before her research was done, without truly considering any other alternative and more peaceful and ethical options than the kidnapping of children, indoctrination, augmentation, and deployment of super soldiers to quell the human rebellion by the surgical application of godlike force. Even if the negotiations wouldn't have changed the course of societal collapse, it could have slowed it enough to allow Halsey the time needed to perfect the augmentations so that kidnapping children wasn't necessary, and instead fully grown, consenting adults could be augmented. This is proven by the fact that only 20 years later, the Spartan-III program, based directly on Halsey's still unfinished research, gave way to 100% success rates for augmentation that would have been suitable for fully grown adults. This is bearing in mind that all Spartan candidates had to be hormonally aged to post-pubescence for the augmentations to be performed successfully, meaning, physiologically speaking, they were adults. This also takes into account the Spartan-III augmentation and Spartan-II augmentations are more or less as powerful as each other. Had Oni have waited a few more years, Halsey would likely have gotten there sooner. She was the original mind behind it, and she is by far the most intelligent human alive in the 26th century. The more recent portrayals of Halsey is as the devil incarnate, and a full-blown war criminal guilty of all and sundry of crimes against humanity. But in reality, she was only guilty of cloning her own brain for the creation of AIs like Kalmaya, Cortana, and the weapon, and interfering with Spartan deployment. Everything else was pinned on her by Oni as their chosen fall guy. Which means from a law perspective, Halsey's status as a war criminal is almost, though not entirely, Oni propaganda. It's what Oni wants you to believe. But again, this doesn't dismiss her culpability in going along with the plans that Oni had laid for her. Yes, this may have been through manipulation, coercion, gaslighting, and maybe even the fear and knowledge of Oni's ability to make people disappear, the threat of death effectively, that kept her silent. One could even go so far as to argue that a degree of professional pride and responsibility played a factor in Halsey's silence. She knew that if she wasn't going to be the one to work on the Spartan program and to help the candidates, the children, become humanity's greatest warriors, they would simply choose someone else, someone whom she was certain would be less capable than her, and also less concerned about their well-being. Her character arc across the entire franchise's history is significantly more nuanced and morally grey than it was made out more recently. I understand, however, why many still view Halsey as a war criminal, and she absolutely should stand trial for her actions. But it definitely isn't as cut and dry as many believe it to be. Her decisions did cause irreparable harm to innocent lives. Her lack of transparency and authoritarian approach contributed to a culture of unethical experimentation. However, her actions were in response to dire circumstances imposed by external threats. She acted within the framework established by the UNSC and the Office of Naval Intelligence, and not entirely of her own volition. The Spartans' success proved her strategic vision correct, albeit at immense moral cost. Dr. Halsey embodies the quintessential morally grey character, neither fully villain nor hero. While her actions were ethically reprehensible by peacetime standards, they were arguably necessary given humanity's existential crisis. The debate surrounding her work serves as a cautionary tale about the cost of survival and the sacrifices made in the name of progress. Ultimately, the ethical legacy of Dr. Halsey is one of both brilliance and hubris. Her story challenges the audience to consider whether the ends truly justify the means, and whether the survival of many can ever warrant the suffering of a few. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, consider hitting the subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss out on future content, and hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. It really does help the channel out significantly. Feel free to pop a comment below on anything you'd like me to cover next, and before signing off I just want to give a shout to my Patreon supporters, Spartan-10148, my singular contender class ancilla, Falcon, Jordan and Poseidon, the metarchs of my facility, Sylphia, Ashley, Esoteric, Spartan-1029 and Chris Allen, my dutiful monitors, Darian, Legion, Labrat, Spartan-137, Chris, Element Zero, J3, Mr. Keys, Gunslinger Cult, Evermore's Personal Devil, Scion Esports, and Saber, my diligent sub-monitors, my dominating fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my loyal enforcers, and all other patrons who continue to support the channel. I can't thank you guys enough. Big props to my Tier 0 YouTube members, Spartan-137, Talia, Fenrir, Bornstella, and Jimbo. and all other YouTube members keeping the installation running on that glorious vacuum energy. And if you really love what I'm doing here, consider supporting the channel via the links in the description. Much love, take it easy, and find peace in the domain.